A Fox News alert for you. Floodwaters starting to recede finally after days in Houston. But thousands of Texans still need rescuing. Today's many residents of a flooded nursing home were finally brought to safety, while helicopter crews rescued other stranded families. For an update on the situation there, we are joined by Trace Gallagher, who has been on the scene since the beginning. Trace, what's it like?
Well, I'll tell you, Tucker, it is receding here in Houston, but boy, you go out to Beaumont and Port Arthur, and the water is still rising out there. We just spent 4.5 hours on a Black Hawk helicopter, and we have been all over southeastern Texas, and the amount of flooding is absolutely stunning. There was a time between Houston and Beaumont, as you hear a Black Hawk fly over, that we had a 70-mile stretch where it was nothing but water. It looked like lake after lake after lake, and in those areas, we counted maybe 6 or 7 neighborhoods that weren't totally inundated, meaning that if you were from Port Arthur or Beaumont, you were either a victim or you knew somebody who was. We were also a part of a very compelling rescue. I want to show you part of that. Watch. But they dropped the basket down. They're clearly looking for somebody, and then as soon as that person gets in, they will hoist that person up. As a rule, the people who are taken up in the baskets are fairly immobile. And here it is. Here we go. This is the first rescue mission we've seen since we've been live with you, Shep. It's a child and her mom, right? Over and over again. Can you imagine being a child like this? It just breaks your heart. Yeah, and the brother and the father were brought up after that, and of course they had a dog, and they brought the dog up as well, safe and sound. You talk about context and perspective, Tucker. You know, when you hear about these numbers, 13,000, 15,000 rescued, they tend to be numbers after a while, but when you're there and you see the faces of these people, it is compelling to say the least, and it gives you an idea of what size the hearts are of these guys from U.S. Customs and Border Protection when they send their air and marine unit out there, and they do this day after day after day. It really is just astounding. They've got a lot of work ahead of them. But I want you to note, Tucker, that we saved a deer for you last night and a dog for you tonight. So we're working on the human and the animal populace for this show on a nightly basis. Tucker.
You've always been my favorite reporter, Trace, but now more than ever. Thank you. Mass devastation in Houston has brought with it a breakdown in law and order, not as bad as in some natural disasters, but pretty bad. There have been numerous reports of looting by storm survivors. Yesterday, ABC reporter Tom Lamas was honest enough to tweet this, quote, "We're witnessing looting right now at a large supermarket in the northeast part of Houston. Police have just discovered a body nearby." Just reporting what he saw. And for that, he was vilified, Lamas was, and accused of attacking hurricane survivors. Dan Bongino was a former NYPD officer, and he joins us now. Dan, this is just a fact of life in situations like this. I've seen it firsthand a lot during Katrina. We saw cops looting Walmart on camera during Katrina. I saw myself people looting liquor stores and shoe stores. That's not the same as starving people feeding themselves. What about our society has changed so much that noting that you're watching it is somehow a thought crime?
Well, we've had complete culture rot, and I noticed, Tucker, because I saw a lot of the mob attack Tom Yamas on Twitter, that it was largely coming from, liberals who seem to feel like they're entitled to the property of other people. Listen, no one's trying to diminish at all the epic human tragedy we're watching unfold right now in Texas. But this kind of reminds me of the old Havelock Ellis quote, that civilization is a thin crust on a volcano. And Tucker, that thin crust is composed of law and order. When order breaks down, we have absolutely nothing. We cannot ever condone looting and the taking of other people's property, because then at what point, where does it end? I mean, relief agencies and government are doing their best to get people fed and get people housed, but we can't condone looting. This is just complete breakdown.
Right. Well, only like a decadent rich kid in Brooklyn would say something like that. And in fact, most people who did, I checked, are decadent rich kids in Brooklyn, of course. But you think about the people who are hurt by this. There were interviews today, for example, with the owner of the Bronze Bar in Houston, and it was being looted. Said, "My business that I've worked for was looted last night. I can't believe people were capable of that." Samir Abrahim, who has got a store there too, watched it being looted on surveillance cameras. These people are taking advantage of the weather and have been robbing us blind since last night. We tried to get there but couldn't reach it due to floods. It's not big corporations who suffer. It's like ordinary, normal working people who suffer as, the crowd cheers them on Twitter. I mean, who pushes back against this? Does anybody have the courage to say, you're not allowed to steal or hurt other people just because there was a storm.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. What kind of like certifiable savage man beast do you need to be to walk into a small business? And there are videos of this on Twitter. Sadly, I wish you can't unsee it, of people looting cash registers. Like, what's your excuse for that? I don't understand. Like, these are small businesses. These aren't the decadent Thurston Howell types. These are people who work their whole lives to keep their heads, and then they're out of the red ink. Yeah, keep their heads above water. No pun intended there. But to stay alive, and you're stealing their money and their livelihood because you have some sense of entitlement during a tragedy. I mean, that's really kind of deranged when you boil that down to the
But it's so consistent. But the left is always cheering on the destruction of ordinary people's stuff and their families and making fun of normal people with jobs and, oh, your stupid patriarchy. You know what I mean? What is it about the American left that always wants to destroy normal life? I don't understand it. Why do they cheer on perversity always?
Well, Tucker, I mean, liberalism is built around nihilism. They're married. They've been joined at the hip, forever. The party of JFK, the Democrat Party of JFK, is dead. It's been taken over and hijacked by a far left that has no adherence to any objective values. They destroy anything that's objectively good. The family, big R rights given by God. So what do? Sure. They have to destroy. And the only thing they can do is make their base angry and make you believe that other people took that stuff from you. Therefore, you're entitled to it. Go get it. It's yours. Look what happened. I mean, you've seen this ideology through critical theory permeate the far left for decades now. And sadly, in moments of tragedy, you can see with the social media mob, it all comes out in its just horror.
They should go cover a riot or a hurricane or a war and see what happens when authority evaporates and disappears, when the cops leave. I bet they wouldn't be cheering it on then. Dan, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
A group of Ivy League professors have written a letter, a really smart one, to their students. It's got a novel idea inside it. Think for yourselves. Up next, we'll talk to Princeton professor Robbie George, who signed that letter, about why such an obvious message is now so rare and wise on campus. Stay tuned.